versus Gottlieb. My name is Rob Dosser. I am obviously not Jeff Gooden. I'm much better looking and much better dressed in our favorite college basketball insider. That's Doug Gottlieb, and we are going to check in on some of the new head coaches in new jobs this season. I'm going to start with probably the most interesting hire. I think it was the most interesting hire that was made this offseason. I think whenever he is in a new job, he is the most interesting hire in the entire sport of college basketball, and that is Rick Pitino back in New York City, back at St. John's, starting the year. He is currently sitting at 5-2. They have losses to Michigan and Dayton, but they beat North Texas on a neutral. They beat Utah, who turned out to be pretty good on a neutral. They beat West Virginia in Morgantown. What do you make of Rick Pitino with the Johnnies, Doug?
Well, obviously, there's a dramatic change there. You basically started a program completely from scratch. You bring in 13 new guys, and you're starting all over. And there's an influx of money. I think that the challenge that he's found is when you take players from other teams, the leading scorer on a bad team is just the leading scorer on a bad team. Doesn't make him a great player. And so what I think he's had to try and figure out, and it's still a learning process, is like, all right, who can really play at that top Big East level? In the Michigan game, they got exposed. They're not ready yet. And it's not like Michigan's an elite team, but they knew who they were coming into the game, whereas St. John's is still trying to figure it out. Ultimately, we know it'll work. It's literally worked everywhere he's been. Will it work this year? I don't think it will. I think they took some guys in the portal that have reputations of not being winning basketball players, and it's really hard even for Rick Pitino to flip them in such short order, especially when they're going to get thrown in the deep end once they play in that league. The problem with that league is going to be that obviously you can pluck off a couple of tier one wins. It'd be challenging, but maybe they get one. But any of the losses to a DePaul, a loss to a Seton Hall, like they can really, really, now Butler obviously just got a gigantic win at home last Saturday, so it won't be as bad. But when you lose those games, now all of a sudden it drags you down and you scheduled wins here in the non-conference. So it's not, they should be 8-2 heading into Big East play. But again, a lot of teams are 8-2 and there's just not enough meat on that bone to make me think they're going to make an NCAA tournament. Do I think the hire works? Yes. Do I think it'll take time? Sure. It's really hard to have a brand new team and entire team and expect them to succeed in this short period of time.
Yeah, especially when you're walking into a league where a team coached by Sean Miller might end up finishing in 8th or 9th place, which is never an ideal situation. All right, I want to head down south. I want to head to the ACC. I want to head to Atlanta, where Damon Stoudemire got off to a 2-2 start with Georgia Tech, with the Rambling Wreck, but he's turning it around. They knocked off then number 21 Mississippi State, and then number 7 Duke in back-to-back games last week. It's hard not to feel good about where this Yellow Jackets program is kind of trending towards right now, right, Doug?
Yeah, look, the challenges to Georgia Tech are going to be the same challenges you have at Vanderbilt, at Northwestern, at Stanford. It may not be viewed nationally as an elite, an academic institution as others, but it is. And then, in terms of NIL, it's hard because you're trying to be competitive in football and in some other sports. And so basketball comes in second. Like the schools that I think are most positioned to succeed outside of the SEC and the really, really big boys is the basketball and the Creightons of this world, the Providence of this world, where basketball is all that matters. And it's not like some crazy academic institution where it's easy to get guys to transfer in, like a Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Stanford, Northwestern, et cetera. So, look, I think Damon knows what he's doing. People forget he was coach of the year in the West Coast Conference at Pacific, and he took over a Pacific program that I think won one game the year before he got there. I think it was a complete mess. So Damon knows what he's doing. The big thing is there's starting to be people in the arena. Atlanta's always kind of been a fickle basketball town. They're in love with Trae Young now. I think they'll be in love with Damon Stoudemire. That's going to help you win some games. But we also have to temper our enthusiasm, understanding that those are home games. Those are great. Let's see what happens as they travel on the road. And those numbers don't lie. They are a terrible shooting team, and that will get exposed as we in the conference play.
Who's more likely to make the tournament, Rick Pitino and St. John's or Damon Stoudemire and Georgia Tech this year?
I'm going to say Damon Stoudemire and Georgia Tech. One, I'm cheating a little bit because they got the Duke win. They got the Mississippi State win. Those are going to be good wins. And then two, I just, there's not the level of dominance at the top of the ACC that there is the Big East. I find it hard to think St. John's is going to beat Nova on the road, going to beat, that top 5 or top 6. And you mentioned what are you going to do when you play Xavier? Like, Xavier is going to be good and tough, and you're just starting to kind of figure it out. So I think it's going to be much harder for St. John's because of the top-heavy nature of that league and because Georgia Tech's already gotten 2 big scalps at home.
Let's move to Penn State. Mike Rose headed back to Central Pennsylvania after spending nearly a decade at VCU and hasn't gotten off to the greatest start for the Nittany Lions. They're 4-4 this season. I do like the hire big picture. I don't know if 1 year is going to be enough to kind of change a team that was kind of playing a certain kind of way last year under Micah Shrewsbury and is going to be playing an entirely new style this year under Mike Rhodes.
Look, I love the hire. Okay, I love the hire. But remember, last year, Micah Shrewsbury had how many 5th years and 6-year guys? It was a 1-year team just kind of all put together. Now, that does allow Mike Rhodes to completely reconstruct it. Here's why I like it. No one plays that way in the league, right? And Rec Hall, no one's going to win in State College. But in the meantime, the way to get people to fill up the Bryce Jordan Center is to play an exciting brand of basketball that even on nights in which they lose, you score 80, 90 points, which I think ultimately they'll get to. It's just hard. And the other challenge to him is, you bring a couple guys with you, okay? And I'm not trying to disrespect VCU in any way, but the Big Ten is different. Those are bigger bodies. There is a reason that guys were recruited at that level and not the A-10 level. And so you have to kind of evaluate, okay, these are guys that work for me there. Do they work at this level? So there'll be some good days, there'll be some bad days. But I like the hire because, again, you can't play the way everybody else does. Everybody in that league plays man. They load up. They got a big burly center. A lot of them got power forwards. They beat the crap out of each other. There's still some forms of motion, a lot of quality shooting. They don't really have traditionally NBA guards, and they don't have the type of athletes that I think ultimately he wants to land at Penn State playing in the front court. I think once he gets there, that'll be a fun team and a fun dynamic style that probably doesn't win the league, but they'll have some upsets because they get people sped up. But the process of getting where they were to where they want to be, I think will take a little bit more time than other places.
Yeah, I love the hire as well. Just think about who rolled through the Big Ten last season, Purdue, and who took down Purdue in the first round of the NCAA tournament and the way that they played in Fairleigh Dickinson. So it makes a lot of sense to me what Mike Rhodes wants to do in that hire. Wichita State. They were a program under Greg Marshall about a decade ago that was going 34-0, that was making runs to the Final Four, that were making deep tournament runs, that were winning Valley championships, that were consistently ranked in the top 15, top 20, top 25. Sending guys to the NBA, Ron Baker, Fred VanVleet, Clay Anthony early. They had dudes. They hired Paul Mills, who did some really, really good things at Oral Roberts and is now sitting here at 7-2 with the Shockers. What do you make of their start, and what do you make of Paul Mills at Wichita State?
Like Paul, of course, he comes from that Baylor coaching family. They had a good sense of how to hit the portal. Obviously, he would have loved to take Max Abmas with him. Instead, Max went to Texas, where he's getting a chance to play at the Big 12. I think, look, on the plus side, a lot of money in Wichita. I'm not sure if people know, not just the Koch brothers, but also in the aviation business. There's a lot of money, and just like I said, this is the perfect type of school that can succeed in the new era because they're the best program in their league, I believe, best basketball program in their league. Basketball matters. You have NIL, and you can get more NIL, and they should have a dominant home court advantage once the roundhouse gets full. So yeah, I like the hire. I love the program, and now they're getting KU to play them. They're getting K-State to play them as well. Like these are things that never happened before, and maybe the reason that they played them was because they think play them while they're down. But again, it's the best job in that league, and every coach in America will sit there and go like, hey, be careful of taking jobs that aren't the best in the league. Wichita is well funded. Wichita will be fine. And Paul knows what he's doing.
when you have a conference that just lost the likes of Houston and the likes of UCF and some of their bigger brands to the Big 12, how important is it to get the best job in the league to start playing like the best program in the league? I mean, look, Memphis, Florida Atlantic, I don't know if that's just going to be a blip on the radar, if that's something that is going to be sustainable. I think the American needs Wichita State to be really, really good again.
They do, right? Them and Memphis. You know, the challenges at, I mean, this is like what happened with UConn when they were in the American.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you sell tickets when East Carolina or Tulane come in? No matter how good Tulane had gotten, didn't matter. People would rather see Georgetown, even when Georgetown's bad, play against UConn. So Wichita State, remember, they're a Valley school. And so to not be in the same league as Creighton anymore when they've got it going, obviously hurts them. And so now you're no Houston. Memphis has got to be good. But, yeah, I think the league needs, and Wichita needs to be right there, like dominating the league, the way that Memphis did back when they were the kingpins of Conference USA, the way that Gonzaga has in the WCC, right? There's room for them and room for Memphis. And, yeah, I completely agree. You have to at some point back it up. But, look, when that place is full, and it's full more often than not, even though they were down the past couple of years, they still drew well. When that place is full, it's a really hard place to play. And they're in this area. Now, obviously, you can transfer within the Big 12 to Big 12 to Big 12 school, but plucking off kids that go to the SEC and transfer down a level, kids that go to the Big 12 and transfer down a level, they're also at the right spot where kids that want to transfer up from the Summit League, for example, they can land. It's a better area than you think in terms of the reach that they have. Again, as long as you have financial backing. And that's really what's changed with NIL. Take Kansas State, for example, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Location used to be a major factor in recruiting. Can't get them because there's no players close. And outside of the Kansases and the Kentuckys and the Dukes, you can't recruit nationally. Now, you have the money, you have the connections with the agents, you can get people anywhere. And so I think that Wichita is well positioned, and the league, like you said, needs them to be dominant.
It's a massive night tonight in college hoops, Doug. We had a top 10 matchup, UConn, North Carolina. We got a top 20 matchup, FAU, Illinois. We have a whole bunch of action happening in the Big 10. We have Big 12, Big East battles going on. We will be making our picks against the spread coming up next here on Stadium. Welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb. I am here subbing in for Jeff Goodman, trying to bring a little bit of ball knowledge to the show. Doug has been undefeated so far on Goodman versus Gottlieb, so I wanted to try to give him his first loss of the season. Let's start by checking in on our poll, Doug. Who has been the most disappointing team in college basketball this season? Villanova and Duke are both sitting there right around 25 to 28%. Of the vote. Michigan State got 18% of the vote. Mississippi State there's got about 10% of the vote. But you think it's somebody that is not listed in our top four, Doug. Why?
I'm just surprised at Maryland, who it's not just that they're 4-4. They got a couple of games that were not really terribly competitive. And remember, this is a team that brings back Julian Reese, right? That's Angel Reese's brother at Maryland, who's athletically off the charts. And then, you bring back Jameer Young, who's your best player from last year, and he's shooting in the low 30s from 2 and from 3, and he's got like a 1.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. I know he's a scorer, not a set you off guard, but considering his age and level of experience, those two just haven't played well. So I think Maryland is the most surprising or I don't know, I want to say underachieving, just disappointing team because my expectations were higher, going to year 2 of Kevin Willard.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought that when they struggled with Davidson and UAB, it said a lot about Davidson and UAB. UAB has lost to McNeese State and Southern since then. Davidson's gotten their doors blown off by St. Mary's, and they lost to East Tennessee State since then. And Maryland, since losing back-to-back games in their MTE, lost by about 100 to Villanova, who we know has not been that great this year, and got blown out at Indiana as well. So I'm with you. The only other team I'd put in that mix, St. Mary's, man. I thought they'd be a top 15 team, and they have not looked great so far this year.
They just don't have, last year they just don't have anybody who scares you off the dribble. They just don't. They don't have the ability to really get into lane and make plays. And so it becomes about offenses and cuts and systems. And I think we kind of overrated St. Mary's, but I also understand that they played a lot of really good teams. And so that's the reason for the result. The results are disappointing, but we can't overly punish teams that go out and play people. Look at Tennessee. They play 3 good teams. They lose all 3. They did beat Wisconsin. That's something they can, and Michigan State in the scrimmage that we all saw, but they lose 3 games to 3 good teams. So some of that is who you play.
All right, let's take a look at tonight's matchups and what we have coming up on the docket. North Carolina, UConn, Jimmy V Classic. The Huskies are laying 5.5 points. Doug, is there any chance that you're taking the underdog here? 5.5, is that enough?
I'm going to take UConn to win. That's a lot of points. I do think it's a really competitive game. I'll take UConn in the points, but I truthfully probably wouldn't go to Vegas. This line feels about right.
Yeah, I like UConn here. I think that UConn wins by double digits. I think that we see them get a little bit of their angst out after losing at Kansas over the weekend. Remember, they were a shot from Cam Spencer on the wing away from taking the lead with 2.5 seconds left in that game. FAU is laying 2.5 points against Illinois in the Garden in the Jimmy V Classic tonight. Doug, who do you like there?
I like FAU because to me, this is why they came back. Games like this. The Bryant game is not a reason to come back to FAU. No disrespect to, a little bit disrespect to Bryant, but FAU against Illinois, getting to play in the Garden on national TV, all the storylines. This is why they came back. I think they take advantage of it. I like FAU more handily than I like UConn in the first one.
Ooh, more handily. You think this is a mismatch?
Well, no. I think it's the UConn Carolina game is a 4 to 7 point game. This one, I feel like it should be maybe an 8 to 10 point game. So I don't know. It's not a mismatch. They're going to run them out of the gym. I just think they have more options, more ball handlers. They have their roles more defined than Illinois does.
Yeah, there's usually when a program like an FAU coming out of a conference like the American makes their way up to the Jimmy V Classic and plays in Madison Square Garden, you might say, I don't know if they're ready for the bright lights. I don't know if they're ready for that big of a stage. These dudes played in the Final Four. They're not going to be fazed by playing in Madison Square Garden. They're going to be ready for it. I'm with you. I like FAU. I might also be an FAU homer because I just spent 4 days with them down in Boca Raton. This team's a lot of fun. They're a team you want to get behind, and I'm telling you, Doug, they're going to have the 2 best players on the floor tonight. I think Nelly Davis and Elijah Martin.
And yeah, I mean, I think Nelly's terrific. I agree with you, and I like that they're also in the backcourt. Coleman Hawkins is a guy who can be a difference maker. He can get on a run. Obviously, he hasn't played every game this year for Illinois. He's one guy who we haven't talked about yet that can carry the Illini because he can play inside and guard Vlad Golden, or he can step outside and make threes and be really hard to guard himself.
All right, talk me through this one, because Wisconsin, coming off of an 11-point win over number 3 Marquette on Saturday, is going on the road to Michigan State, who's sitting here at 4-3, who lost in the Breslin Center to James Madison, and Wisconsin is getting 5.5 points here. Is this just the Vegas saying that they got this much respect for Michigan State? Like, what is this line?
Well, Wisconsin's had some uneven stuff early in the year as well. But I too like Michigan State. I last year I think Wisconsin beat them at their place. They usually split home and home. But I think this is one where, like they've struggled to find minutes for Manny Sissoko against other teams. Now you get into conference play and there's much greater confidence on it. I think this is one where Izzo plays his veteran players a ton, and the younger players play more once we get past January 1st. I like Michigan State even with that sizable number, considering how well Wisconsin's played of late.
Yeah, Doug, this is one of those ones where I look at it and I'm so convinced that Wisconsin plus 5.5 is the play that I know I need to fade myself, and I know I need to say Michigan State is going to win this game. It's going to end up being a 10-point win, and Wisconsin is going to come off that blowout win and lay an A here. All right, real quick, we're heading out to your West Coast. San Diego State favored by 2.5, taking on Grand Canyon. We got to talk about the West Coast teams if we got you here, Doug.
I mean, I heard Live on the Line was talking about it. That atmosphere with the Havoc, their student section, is going to be intense. San Diego State doesn't have enough firepower. That's really what it comes down to. I think they're walking to a hornet's nest. I like the Lopes. I'm going to take the Lopes in the upset.
Ooh, money line, a little 2.5 point underdog money line here. Listen, this has been Goodman versus Gottlieb. We need to rename the show whenever I'm on it to Doster versus Gottlieb. Doug, I am sorry to tell you that you have taken your first loss of the college basketball season here on today's episode of the Goodman and Gottlieb Show on Stadium. We will see you guys again coming up later on this week.
All right, so Dan Roberts, whose X bio reads independent, Twitter,
Okay.
X, they're interchangeable. But his X Twitter bio reads independent senior sports analyst and insider. He tweets out that UCLA quarterback Dante Moore is expected to transfer to Michigan. This tweet has over 77,000 views, JP.
I mean, you're going to lead me to a tweet by a guy who's got 254 followers? Are we saying that's legit?
Might be.
On the flip side, my guy Andrew Smith, who has at least 534 followers and is on the Ohio State beat for 11 Warriors, says that he's heard from multiple sources around the country that Ohio State is very much a contender to land the former 5-star recruit Dante Moore. It's a conflicting report.
Someone's going to be happy and someone's going to be sad. Dante Moore will be rich.
Yeah, some of these quarterbacks are going to have plenty of money to deal with. But this is Red Corner, Blue Corner right here on Stadium. That's Jake Butt, Michigan Wolverine, All-American, tight end, Mackey Award winner, all of the things. Really great guy, too.
And this is Ohio State captain and national champion Joshua Perry.
All right, and we got a lot to talk about here. We started off with the Dante Moore tweets. He's one of the hot transfer quarterbacks in the portal. I think one of the things that's attractive about him is he's got a little bit of leeway in terms of how long he can play, a ton of eligibility as a young guy. Ohio State and Michigan looking to kind of renew their battle in the portal, this time going after him. He threw for over 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns with 9 interceptions for the Bruins. Certainly looked like a young guy a lot of times. He's a Michigan kid, UCLA and Michigan. Oregon and Michigan in the mix before he chose UCLA. If you had to pick a school that would probably have the edge here to win this battle, Ohio State or Michigan, which is it?
So there's a few things working here. One is that we know for a fact Ohio State's quarterback room is wide open. You know, so assuming pretty much whoever transfers in as a quarterback from the big name tier 1 names, most likely Ohio State has looked them in the eyes and said, this is your battle to lose. So that's working. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy's decision is just quite yet. I will say, because of the Michigan ties, and we'll talk about some more options for Ohio State later, that what makes more sense to me, you mentioned he wanted to go to Michigan early in his recruiting before deciding to go to UCLA.